everyone. This is Pam Reese with Adventures in Aging, and I'm here with my friend
Gary Vandenberg. It's great to be back. Pam, what's today's topic?
Today we're going to talk about losses.
Wow.
And before I get into that explanation, just wanted to give a big thank you to all of our listeners for sharing, subscribing. We can't thank you enough. Keep listening. If there's a topic that you particularly love, we would like to hear from you.
Isn't it great to get that feedback? And we appreciate that, and keep it coming.
Yes, sir. So, Gary, losses in life.
Losses.
Dealing with loss. And so I'm going to read something to you, and then we're going to continue to talk about it.
Go ahead.
Life is a long series of losses. It's pretty much the only thing guaranteed in our existence. From moment to moment, year to year, we give up and leave behind our former selves that we will never, ever recover. We lose family, friends, relationships, jobs, and communities. We lose beliefs, experiences, perspectives, and passions. And ultimately, we will one day lose our existence entirely.
Wow, that's a downer. I hope things get better.
Right.
Please keep listening, everybody.
Please don't go and be depressed in a closed-door room.
I'm sure you've got some great suggestions on this topic.
So when we talk about losses in life, it's not just the death of a loved one. It's not the death of a relationship, even though that's one of the major losses, and we'll touch on that. But it's the loss of the things that were familiar to you, the structure in your life, the experiences that you had. And mostly a loss is what you've enjoyed,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and what you're comfortable with and what you thought you were good at, too.
Yeah, because if you lose something you didn't enjoy, you don't care.
I really don't care. Yeah,
No.
my golf game, I can lose my golf game because
Right.
I was never any good at it anyways.
We can all think of things that we could lose and we would be just fine.
Growing things in gardens, I'm not good at that. I tried to ask my family if I could grow a weed garden with weeds.
Okay, I was wondering where we were going with this.
But and they said you probably wouldn't even grow that. You wouldn't be successful with that. I'm terrible at gardening.
So losing a garden is not a big deal to you.
No problem at all.
So just to take it a little bit deeper, I read a story that a man wrote about a loss of a memory and trying to regain it back. And he talks about him and his wife enjoying their dating years. When they first met, where they first met, the first months of their relationship, and how fabulous and wonderful and almost fantasy-like, right?
Oh, yeah. In that point of relationships, you have everything in common. I remember one time saying to a girlfriend, we even have the moon in common.
Okay, you didn't say that.
I did, yeah.
No, that's probably the corniest thing I ever heard.
Well, you're finding things in common if you want to keep the relationship going.
And I got to know, how'd she respond?
Yeah, she said, yeah, we probably have that in common with the rest of the
And then she
planet
broke up
Earth.
with you the next day. Oh, okay, back on a more serious note.
Right.
So he is talking to his wife, and they're remembering these magical moments at this magical place. It was gardens, it was fountains and ponds, and a very beautiful setting and a picnic. And they often, through their 35 years, talked about if only, right? If we could recapture those moments, that would be great. And so they just realized one day, why not? Yeah. We can do that. Why not?
Sure. Most people think. A lot of people think that thought. Let's go back to a vacation spot or somewhere special.
Right. And so they do. And he describes that entering that environment, that area that they once were, is now leaving him with a sadness.
Why? Why is that?
And he explains that as they entered the venue, as they opened the picnic basket, as they started to talk about their lives years and years ago, remember this, we were here, we were there, oh, look, that's still the same, or look, no, that's different. He felt a sadness of that person in himself and in his wife that they lost over those 35 years.
Gosh.
They were no longer at that age. They were no longer in a vibrant honeymoon newness type of feeling. And he described that although that feeling at that day was good, It was nice to go back. They could never, ever in their lives recapture the excitement of the moments that they shared those 35 years earlier.
Well, sometimes when things get lost in life, they gain importance, though, don't they? When I remember on my own computer losing like pictures or files one day. They really weren't that important until I lost them. You know what I mean? So somehow when things change that, I had a boss one time that he would often say that when you go into a bridge and you look down and the water's going underneath it, it's not the same water as the last time you visited there. It meant
so
something.
Philosophically, that is so true.
It's different water going.
It's different every time, albeit similar, but perhaps a feeling is just not the same feeling that you once had. So this takes loss to a whole different level, but we all experience those normal losses, right?
Absolutely.
Think back to high school and your first girlfriend.
Oh yeah. There's a loss right there. So what I clearly remember about that was coming home and I'm at the kitchen table and kind of frumpy a little bit that things didn't work out. And my dad goes, what's going on? I said, that didn't work out. And he looks right at me, deadpan, and says, there'll be another bus coming soon. There's going to be another bus coming. I'm like, buses?
Did you feel relieved?
We weren't even on the bus route. What are you talking about?
So girls were equated to buses
in his
coming
mind,
every 20 minutes.
Yeah. I think the next bus took a little longer than 20 minutes.
So 10 years later, that next bus came around.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
Oh, how funny.
For that advice.
So when we go through those losses as teenagers, right, and I'm not even going back to childhood years of loss of a toy, loss of a pet, but when we have that first loss of a relationship, you feel like you're dying.
Oh, yeah. It's pain. It's painful. It's physically painful, mentally painful.
Your heart sick, right?
Wow.
Your heart hurts. And Gary, did you know that pain of loss or that pain that you feel is a true or physiological event in your body? I
believe that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm having flashbacks now. Yeah, I remember that.
You feel sick to your stomach. Do you ever hear people say that? I'm so sad or I'm so sick over my loss.
Absolutely, yeah.
So physical loss creates physical episodes in our bodies. It increases inflammation throughout our body. We start having heart palpitations. It increases our blood pressure. Our pulse rates go up. We become very anxious. Our gastrointestinal system becomes overinflamed. And so those physical symptoms that you're feeling are true. Just like you have the true physical symptoms of goodness, right? Of no loss, of something great in your life, and you get the butterflies, and you get. Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah. I think it's important to have an emotional connection to the things that you're doing. It heightens your awareness. It usually makes things have more relevance and importance. You think about how people bring in all their different senses to music and how things smell and everything else when there's occasions that happen. You think about weddings, or you think about different events you're at, graduations from school.
Yeah.
They bring all the emotions to heighten the whole experience, I'm sure.
So you and I were having a conversation earlier about what's our biggest loss? What's our biggest loss in life?
What's our biggest loss in life?
Yeah. So for you.
What's my biggest loss in life? Well, you kind of caught me off guard here. I don't recall what I said. Do you remember what I said?
Gary, you're killing me. Yes. So, no, but it was a series, right? You talked about losing a job.
Oh, okay.
Losing your red balloon.
Oh, my red balloon. Yeah, the things that jumped out to me I think this was my earliest recollection. Thanks, Pam, for bringing that around. I was at a mall, and I was probably like 4 years old. And I think it was my birthday. And we'd gotten a balloon, the red balloon. I'll never forget it. And it's on this string. We go out to the parking lot. Somehow the balloon lets go. Well, next thing you know, I can't catch the string, and it's floating away, and it's going further and further away. And it was gone. It was like it's never coming back. It's those kind of things. And then I was also sharing about 2 weeks ago, we had a cat, little Callie, and we're playing with it 1 minute, and we live out on a farm type of setting. And Callie didn't come back. Callie disappeared. And,
moved on to another
maybe
family.
she'll come back tomorrow, and then we put up signs and put out different notices. No sign of Callie, and even though it's, it's a cat and it's an outdoor cat, you still go through this loss.
Like a grieving process.
Yeah, and now it's been a few weeks. Callie's not coming back.
Right.
And you just have to kind of weirdly move on. But yeah, you go through those still emotions in some strange way. And whether it's that or, like I said, losing files on a computer, or whether it's, fortunately I was thinking about things getting stolen. I've never had really anything of value stolen.
Right.
I've
Me
lost
either.
some things, but I was thinking about how horrible that must be, that you have something and now you don't have something, right?
Or think of people that their homes are burnt down. The loss of their home, the loss of every single possession that they ever had in life is gone, or a hurricane, or, national or natural disaster. And those types of losses absolutely create renewal. Right? It creates a renewal of life, a renewal of the way you think, the renewal of the way you act. And so many times it's hard for us to focus on that renewal because we're going through that grieving process of what we lost.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, things happen, and then in many cases, things are better in the long run when you stop and think about it. Sometimes if you're in and out of a relationship, that was going to be the one. Well,
right.
I've been happily married almost 40 years now to someone else. How's that sound?
Yes.
So things do work out in a very positive way. Sometimes when you lose a job, it's devastating, especially one that you've been at for like 10 years, which I was at, and they laid me off with a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my gosh, now what do I do? Well,
so I agree with that. In losing a job, and in my career, I had several long-term jobs. I didn't move around a lot. But when I left those jobs, my biggest loss were the people.
Oh, yeah.
The people you work with, the people that became your work friends, your work family. And then one day you wake up and they're now no longer in your life, and you thought they were like your best friends.
Oh, yeah.
You soon realize everybody can go on without you.
Right. Yeah. Well, life goes on. I mean, it does.
So with loss comes grieving. And we briefly brought this up on another podcast, and you talked about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Right.
So can you just go through that with us again, and how that equates to the losses in all of our lives that we all face?
Sure. Yeah. In college, I went into gerontology, and it's kind of a whole long story there, but I did take a course on death and dying. And I remember one of the great things about that was that the instructor, and I remember this was many years ago, that he had some kind of an accident, I think a boating accident type of thing, and he'd fallen and he'd punctured his lung.
Oh my gosh.
And he was close to death. How's that sound?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you probably are. You're a nurse.
Yeah.
And so, but the fact that he was able to convey his life experience to, what it meant, and then he was able to tie it in. Well, somebody named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, many people have heard of her back, and I think it's like around 1969, if I'm not mistaken, wrote a book called Death and Dying. And there was pluses and minuses to it. The plus was she really set a standard of these different stages, and we've all kind of heard those, and I wanted to touch on them. And then there's been some other authors since then that have looked at it a different way. Her study was really based on one group at one time. That was kind of the challenge and some of the controversy that came along with her approach and her science. But what she identified was these stages, and I thought we just kind of talked through them. When something happens, whether it's a loss of someone passing away or potentially passing away, or a loss of something significant in your life. So the first one I think we can relate to is denial. We're all
100%.
That we all get into this mindset.
It can't be true.
I cannot believe that's true.
Right.
And so we kind of go through there. Other authors, such as one gentleman or a lady is called Bowlby, Bowley, right? I probably butchered that, and Parks.
Sure.
And they came up with, that can also be termed as shock and disbelief. There's a shock that goes on when that happens.
Isn't that true? When you suffer a loss, you are initially in a disbelief state. In fact, you want to overturn it in your mind.
And you're almost numb. You're almost numb to what's going on. I remember initially when 9/11 happened, and it was a numbing experience, at least for me. This is like television. This cannot be happening.
Right. You're waiting for the announcement that it didn't happen.
Yeah, that this was something else.
Right.
And then the second phase there deals with anger. And I think anger, we can all relate to that term. It's like, why me? Why is this happening to me? It's those types of things.
So a common feeling with loss is to be angry at that person. So if you lose a loved one, some people are very angry with that loved one because they left them.
Right, just angry with the situation, angry at yourself, angry at the situation, the timing.
It's a very common feeling.
There's lots of those things. So there's denial, anger, and then there's bargaining. And bargaining is, I often think of bargaining is usually with God, is where I was always bargaining,
right.
Trying to figure out if you pray hard enough, if you think hard enough, if I
was a better person, I will go to church every Sunday. I will give more, have more faith.
Making deals with whatever it might be. And actually, those other authors, they term those two areas of anger and bargaining into something called searching and yearning. And that's where you're trying to, undo the new reality and question the reason for it. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
It does.
And then, obviously, the next one it gets into is depression. And depression, I think we can all relate to that phrase. It's just the idea of just apathy, losing interest, just kind of becoming distant.
And Gary, research has shown that the depressive part of grieving stays with you the longest.
Does it? Yeah.
And it vacillates between depression and sadness.
And one thing in all of these studies that they've done on death and dying and loss and those things is the fact that not everybody goes through all these. Sometimes you unfortunately miss a spot, you skip a spot, you go back and forth through these things, and I think that's what's been updating over the years. And then the final stage there is the phrase acceptance. So you got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And, again, sometimes people don't, have an opportunity to go through there. Sometimes it's just hard to deal with those things. But wouldn't that be great if you get to a point where you just kind of say, it is what it is, and be able to move on?
It would be. And unfortunately, we're humans and our minds don't always think like that. But surprisingly, we all tend to get through it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, what's interesting about those steps is I've used them in business meetings. I've sat there and the new management team will come in.
You were angry and you were depressed.
Yeah, and, right. and they say, well, we're going to start doing things this way, or we're letting these people go, or we're going to bring in somebody new to run this place.
Yes.
And so I sit down there and I go, all I got to do is get through those steps as quickly and as normally as possible to the acceptance phase.
Did you find yourself during those times consciously thinking like that?
Oh yeah. Each time I said, I can't believe this is happening. This is crazy. I'm mad at whoever boss is, or whoever the company is, whoever's buying us or selling us or whatever it is. Bargaining. Well, maybe they'll keep me on. Maybe there'll be new people coming on. Maybe new opportunities.
You are so right. People do go through those scenarios with their friends, their family. These are their conversations.
Oh, yeah. And depression. Well, yeah, no one's here to talk to me yet. This isn't a good sign.
Yes, yes.
And then finally acceptance, going, hey, it is what it is.
So do you find it easier or better to talk to others to lift you up? So when people have a loss or they're grieving, and in some cases, they'll reach out to others. I want to hear what you think. I want to hear something encouraging from you.
Reaching out to people.
It's,
I like telling stories, so these things become stories. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Like everything else. Like, you won't believe what just happened.
So one of the most thought-provoking activities is when you have a death in your family, or someone is diagnosed terminally, and you are at an event with your friends and acquaintances, and they all know, right? They all understand and know your situation, and they don't know how to talk to you about it. Or you might have been given a tragic diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, or you yourself have encountered a horrific event. People around you are more uncomfortable than the person who's experiencing the negative or the drastic event.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think there's these go-to phrases, that never work. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Probably the best thing I've seen people do is just be a listener, but sometimes people want somebody to give feedback or this or that when they're going through these times of tough loss, right?
Right.
They're trying to make sense out of something that's probably doesn't make any sense.
So, and that's a good point, Gary, because there isn't a lot of sense you can make out of loss, right? Unless your loss is because you misplaced something, right? That you've misplaced in your house, you never find it until you move 15 years later.
Right, and that does happen, right?
Yeah, right. I think you and I had that conversation once, that all of a sudden something pops up that we thought was long gone.
Long gone, yeah, and there it is.
And then guess what, Gary? We learned how to live without it just fine.
Right.
But research shows that people that are experiencing a loss or a sadness or going into the grieving process really do appreciate others talking to them. And so as much as we might say today, no, I really don't want to talk about it. I really just want to stick to myself. If you have a caring person and an interested person asking you questions, it's very therapeutic to open yourself up to them and to discuss that and to discuss how you're feeling.
Yeah, well, people are going through processing. I've always respected, I've not been good at this in my life.
Yeah.
If somebody does lose somebody, to come back later when they've processed things. Maybe it's weeks or maybe it's months later. I think that initial shock is almost strange. Does that make sense? I've been at funerals where the person's family member has passed away and they're like still numb. How's that sound?
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're not even beginning to process it. And I'm thinking, it'd be great to stay in touch in a couple of weeks or months. That's when they probably will get through to a certain point here of being, I'll be more supportive then.
Sure. So another interesting fact about loss is that there are generally 3 losses that are unconceivable, that are difficult to reconcile. Not that every loss isn't tragic, but one would be the loss of freedom, the loss of independence, and loss through tragedy. Because it's unexpected loss. It's you've not geared up for it. And so those 3 losses in anybody's life would be a traumatic incident and a traumatic event. But having said that, going through those phases of Kubler-Ross, going through the exercises of literally talking how you feel to others is a healing process. Do you believe that?
Oh yeah, I think people they have to keep talking. I've been around people that tell the same thing over and over and over again. I'm thinking it's because they got to just talk it out. Right?
They have to talk it out.
Yeah, and that somehow maybe if they talk about it enough, it'll make sense. Their wiring will get rewired or something.
Yes, and then when we think of growing older and us aging, and we talk, obviously that's our thing. The older we get, the more we start thinking about our losses in life. But do you find that when you look back at those losses, you can see where some of those actually became our opportunities? Oh,
yeah. Oh, for sure. I think anytime when something happens, I've always been one that says, especially when it's more challenging time, that's when my strengths come out. How's that sound? And I think that comes out in other people too. I remember going to my father's funeral. It was, he had died suddenly on a Sunday morning.
Oh, my.
And just unexpectedly.
Unexpected.
And at the funeral there, one of his good friends came over and just had all the right things to say.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And, I don't think I've seen that gentleman since, but it's been many years. But it's the fact that was his strength. That was his time to step up and console other people.
Yeah.
And I think we all kind of play that role in the different degrees to different people. So.
Yes. So in the process of loss and grieving and sometimes you search for answers, right? It's kind of like the bargaining. Why? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to you? And a lot of people, and I'd say maybe most people, start searching for spiritual answers to that, right? Which helps you reconcile, which gives you peace, which gives you hope. and that propels you into newness and to start looking at the areas of life or activity that you would change in order to not replace, but to reconcile, I guess, or to make it better. But these are things that every human being will go through in their whole entire life. And when we look at these losses, it generally means never again. Do you agree with that? It means never, ever again.
Yeah, it's the new normal, that something is happening and we kind of go through that. I know when I was looking at those different stages dealing with death and dying, one of the newer updated ones is dealing with the final stage being called redirecting emotional energy. And that's really for the grieving survivors, the fact that at some point they have to move on and they begin to engage in new things in their life, new activities, new friends, new experiences. And so that's been kind of brought into that whole original Kubler-Ross thing, and it's now becoming a little bit more realizing that, part of the whole process involves everybody, and that also involves the people left behind and how they move on with their lives and their existence.
So when there is actual loss in life, it is a piece of losing of yourself. That piece of you is gone forever. But knowing that new pieces are going to fall into line is the consolation. It is what the positive outcome could be. So I want to go through a little bit of understanding a little bit more about why loss is so horrible. And so one of the research indicators would be that as individuals, we want to feel good about ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
You always want to feel good about yourself.
Pursuit of happiness, right?
The pursuit of happiness, 100%. And we like positivity to fuel our minds. And so if there's an event, and loss is one of the worst events in life, you lose that, and you lose a part of who you are. Do you agree?
It makes sense. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So in relationships, when you lose the relationship due to death, due to a breakup, due to someone moving, that was a person that you put your heart and soul into, right? Emotionally, mentally, and now.
Oh yeah, I've got a good story. There's a little upbeat thing here. So when I was engaged and newly married, my wife had an uncle, and this guy I got along with him great. Wherever we had events, he was always engaging with me. And soon after we got married, I heard that he had passed away. I mean, somewhat suddenly. I'm like, oh my gosh, the one person I got along with quite well.
Oh my gosh.
I got along with everybody well,
yeah.
but I mean, just the fact that
that's awful.
I'm really going to miss this guy.
Yeah.
And
you had a sadness.
Yeah, a very sadness. And went to the funeral, and I remember sitting, I was in the back row for some weird reason, and sitting there, and I'm going, man, I'm really going to miss him.
Yeah.
And and all of a sudden I look to my right, and like 4 seats down is this guy.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and he's waving at me. He's doing this little hand wave.
Is this like a dream?
No, this is real.
Is this out of a movie?
And talk about loss. I went from total, kind of like I didn't know him that well, but I'm going to miss him.
Are you serious? So he's sitting.
Yeah, and he's doing his little hand wave to me like,
so
hi.
Who died?
I don't know. I didn't know who died.
Oh, scary. You were there.
So at the end, we did a little walk up to and unfortunately, I look in there. I'd never seen this gentleman before.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a different uncle. Yeah, I was asking my wife last night. I said, do you
Who
remember
was
when
that uncle?
Yeah.
What she remember?
Yeah, she goes, yeah, you mixed them up. So, but I remember going over to the one I liked, that I knew, and I said, it's like, you rose from the dead. I can't believe it. I thought you were in the box.
Oh, my gosh, Gary.
Isn't that crazy?
No. So in other words, the person who really did pass away, you had no connection with whatsoever.
Never met the person.
It wasn't a feeling of loss for you?
Unfortunately not. But I could, relate to the families and everything else that had lost. And he was an older gentleman, not to justify anything, but the fact was that the one that my buddy, was there, and it was just so funny the way he was smiling and waving to me at this funeral. and just how we do those types of things, and also how we have, in some weird way, connections to famous people that pass away too.
Oh my God! So we were talking about this the other day,
right? And celebrities, Michael Jackson.
You would have thought Michael Jackson was my brother when he passed away.
Isn't that crazy? John Lennon. I mean, and
Princess Diana.
Yeah, we get so close, and it's so crazy because they don't know us. Does that make sense? But yet somehow,
and we've never met them personally.
Yeah, and yet somehow we're shocked.
We're grieving.
And then the other weird thing is that the people that you thought had died many years ago, and he just died. I'm like, he died just now? I thought he had died 10 years ago.
The unmemorables. Oh my
That's
gosh.
an awful experience. I'd already grieved for him years ago.
Yeah, I'm done grieving.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
But it's it is interesting how we approach these things. Again, when we talk about pain and suffering, I've always said, if you're really going to be in pain, go all out. Be really much in pain. I wish I could.
If you're going to be in pain,
go
hurt.
all out. Yeah, go all out. I wish I could be one of those people that really could let it go, just crying and screaming and yelling, because I think that's probably in some weird way.
Do you think that's healthy?
I think that's probably more healthier than obviously keeping it in.
Yeah.
I'd rather have somebody wailing, I guess you call it, when they have something.
Uncontrollably wailing or just slightly wailing?
Uncontrollable. I'm
okay.
Go all in. So,
all right, let it out.
And when something good is happening, go all in and really have it as a positive experience too. I know we were going to kind of drift here a little bit into some of the concepts of death and dying, and what came to mind was Tim Russert. Tim Russert was the Meet the Press guy.
I remember him.
And he passed away when he was just 58 years old.
Oh.
I always liked him because if there's some resemblance to my face and his face, how's that sound?
Oh.
I used to kid that I was some distant relative of
really?
his, which I'm not.
Yeah.
But I know at his funeral, Maria Shriver, she's a famous person, gave a great eulogy kind of comments. And what she was saying was how she's imagine being at the beach with other people, and how imagine somebody's on the boat that you love and they're floating out into the ocean there, and they're getting further and further away, and you're waving and you're kind of upset because they're gone. They've gone off to the new place. And you kind of go through that emotion of that loss, like they're gone.
They're
right?
gone.
They're gone.
They're washing out to sea.
They're going, and they're slowly becoming a little dot, and then they're gone, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but somehow the story then moves to another beach, where people are standing at the beach and they're straining their eyes as much as they can, and they see the little dot, and it starts coming closer and bigger, and the crowd is excited and waving. He's almost here.
He's in heaven.
He's almost arrived.
Yeah.
He's almost arrived.
The heavenly beach.
Yeah. And I always think of things, when I think about things like death and dying and loss, I hope I'm on that boat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or I hope I'm on one of those beaches that's welcoming the next guy coming up, than I am saying goodbye and never to have that hope of ever seeing the person again.
Gary, having that thought and that hope is what gives us peace.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think we all need hope and all of those types of wonderful things. But it's interesting when I was thinking about, the subject of death and dying, and that kind of ties in here a little bit, was how, sometimes people are dealing with it instantly. Something terrible happens. You get a phone call. I knew somebody recently, and they got a phone call that their nephew had passed away, and it's like shock and horror type of thing. And then there's other people that go through dealing with an older parent, a relative, even a patient of theirs that goes in and out of the hospital like multiple times.
Yeah.
And how do they deal with it? See, you're a nurse. How do you deal with mentally going, well, I think Mr. Jones is going to the hospital. We may not see him again, right?
And then
he comes back.
He comes back. So that doesn't happen frequently, but it does happen.
How do nurses process that? Or?
So nurses, any healthcare professional is so unfortunately accustomed to death and dying, and to the grieving process. And I don't want to say that you become hard, because no heart really becomes hard to it, but you begin to be the conduit, right? You know that you're the communicator. You know that you're the voice. And in delivering that voice, you also know that you're the comforter. And so somehow having some dual roles makes that
because I was thinking
that better.
There's nurses that are involved with it, doctors.
Yes.
You see that on television, I guess, more than anywhere. The doctor's coming on has to interact with the family. EMS, police officers, firemen, morticians. That's their business.
It's their business.
Yet ministers and priests, and then hospice workers, have to deal with this all the time.
And thank God for them. They are the angels, right? When you have it in your heart to work with the death and dying and make that a comfortable moment, that it's actually beautiful and something I never really realized until my mom became hospice. Yeah, and I would have never have said this prior to that, but at those moments, I found all of that to be a very comforting type of event.
Yeah, maybe a future podcast will bring up about hospice because there's so many benefits and people wait much too late. I had a good story about a hospice situation. Is in LaSalle, Illinois.
Okay.
And a gentleman was in there, and he says out the window, this is a true story, he looks out the window, and here they're planting this little tree.
Okay.
And he says to the staff, what are they doing out my window? And they said, Mr. Jones or whatever his name is, that's a tribute to you. That's your lasting legacy. Isn't that nice?
I love that.
And when I visited him, the tree was like 15 feet tall, and he was still laying in bed.
He was still watching it grow.
Yeah, because he goes, the minute I heard that,
He defied the odds. It's motivation to keep going.
So
I love that.
There's our tip of the week. Yeah. Plant a tree.
So I'm going to end our podcast and conversation today with a thought. So in loss, in grieving, you have depression and sadness. And depression, and I'm going to give you definitions. Although they're similar, depression occurs when something feels meaningless, and sadness occurs when something feels bad.
Yeah, that's deep.
That's deep. Wow. Something for us all to think about, but we all know these are human emotions. We all go through them. And when it's all said and done, we tend to find our strength and we tend to move forward and we learn something, even though we often don't see what that teaching is. Someday in life, if we really had a profound thought, we might see what we learned from that event.
And kind of, looking at this subject and thinking about my career and your career and what we do. I view each day when I wake up as like I'm being born every morning.
Gary, you're the most positive person I've ever known in my life.
The sun is coming up. I take the shower. The shower's rinsing my sins away or something like that.
And you truly believe this?
Well, I think every day I live in 24-hour cycles, I think.
Okay.
So, and then I was thinking at the end of the day how if you ever been to like Florida,
right?
All these senior citizens, they all like march to the seashore at the sunset, right?
Right.
And I think their message is also a day done well. We did our life, and so if we can ever do that, make the most of it.
I love that. Let's leave our podcast today with end your day every day with a day done well. All right, Gary, we did it. Hey, I want to thank everyone for listening. Please remember to share. Please remember to rate us and talk about us. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.